So my wife and I, we have odd interests that we watch on television. Right now, we've been watching a lot of YouTube videos about tattoos. We don't really have any plans on getting tattoos. We just think the process is really interesting. And our favorite thing to watch right now is they'll take a tattoo, good, bad, otherwise. They'll show it to a panel of tattoo artists, and they'll just get their thoughts and opinions on it. And sometimes they're really good tattoos, and they'll say, well, this is really great because this or that. Most of the time, though, they're really awful tattoos. Kind of like the one we're going to show you right now. It's just a really, really bad tattoo, and they'll look at something like this, and they'll say, here's maybe what went wrong with the application. Most of the time, they'll poke fun at it, you know? And this is a bad tattoo, and I don't know if you can see it, but it's two characters from The Lion King, and this is a back piece, so it's a very large tattoo. It's very poorly drawn. It's very poorly applied, and so they would look at something like this, and they would point out the faults and the flaws, and even if you don't know anything about tattoo application or art, if you have eyes, you can get up close and see this is bad, guys. This is not a good tattoo. But no matter how bad it is, these artists, they'll look at it and they'll critique it, and then at the end they'll always say something like this: but as long as the client is happy, whatever, you know. And in an instance like this, I suppose that is all that matters. As long as you're happy with it, it's your body, it's your tattoo, whatever. But there isn't enough happiness in the world that is going to make this a good tattoo. It's ugly. It's poorly drawn. It's poorly applied. Happiness doesn't change the reality about something, right? And that's true in all of our lives. A lot of times we say things to people that we love, that we care about. We might say, as long as you're happy, that's all I care about. That's all I want. You know, and maybe you've said it, I know I've said it, but when we say that, as long as you're happy, I don't think we really mean it. Not entirely, anyway. It's not like we want these people that we love to be unhappy. We don't want these people to be miserable. But as long as you're happy is usually what we say when we realize that the best outcome isn't going to happen. As long as you're happy is what we kind of settle for. For instance, if somebody were to come up to you and say, I think I'm going to get a big tattoo of the Lion King from some guy that's never done it before in his life, the correct answer is, no, that's a bad idea. But when it becomes obvious you can't talk them out of it, you might say, well, as long as you're happy, I guess that's all that matters. But happiness doesn't make this a good decision. Happiness doesn't make something a good career move. Happiness doesn't make something a moral choice. Happiness doesn't make a destructive behavior any less destructive. Happiness, as long as you're happy, is really kind of a concession a lot of times. It's what we settle for when the best just isn't going to happen. And that's why Jesus never said, just do whatever makes you happy. I'll settle for that. He cares too much about his people. We're continuing a series this week. This is part 2 in a series called Things Jesus Never Said. This is a series about those hard teachings of Jesus. You know, when you look at what he actually teaches in the gospel, not all of it's easy. Some of it's rather difficult to live out. And so there's this temptation to maybe soften up what he says a little bit, or maybe just change it altogether in order to make it go down a little smoother. But he said what he said, and he meant what he meant, and our job as his people is to try to follow what he actually said and not the things he never said. This morning, we're going to be tackling this idea that really Jesus just wants us to be happy. And to do that, we're going to be looking at a story in the book of John, chapter 8. So if you have your Bibles with you, I would encourage you to open those up to the book of John, chapter 8. If you don't have your Bible with you, as always, you can follow along on the screens to the side. But I would encourage you instead to download the FCC Monmouth app on your mobile device if you haven't already. Click the Sunday button in the bottom right-hand corner, and you'll find a section that's called Sermon Notes. It's got our passage already pulled up along with our notes for you to follow along in. So John chapter 8, once again, is where we're going to be. Now, again, we'll just get right to it. This idea that Jesus is primarily concerned with our personal happiness is just a falsehood. Now, again, like our situation with the bad tattoo, it's not like Jesus wants his people to be unhappy. He does love us. He doesn't seek us to be miserable. That's not his goal. But the idea that Jesus is overly concerned with how happy I am just isn't reality. And we see that in this story that we're going to read this morning. This is John chapter 8. You may have heard this story before. We're going to start in verse 2. It goes like this. At dawn, he appeared again in the temple courts where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" And they were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. So here's the scenario. Jesus is in the temple courts, a rather populated area. It's an area that's has some religious significance. So people are here to learn about God and about his word. These are church people, probably. And in come these religious teachers with this woman who's been caught in adultery. And that phrase, caught in adultery, means like in the act and in the moment of adultery. So they're not going to parade her through the streets naked, but she's probably not as put together as she normally would be. Her clothes are probably put on a little haphazardly. Her hair is probably a little disheveled. And as far as her mental outlook and her emotional well-being at this point, you ever been woken up from a dead sleep by like a crash or a loud noise? You got like that panic on your face, all of that adrenaline. That's probably what she's feeling right now because she's in a very precarious situation and her whole world is about to come crumbling down around her as far as she's concerned. And so they bring this woman and they kind of toss her before Jesus in front of all of these people and they announce her crimes and they say, "Jesus, here's what the Bible says we ought to do. What do you say we should do?" And that's a difficult question. It's complicated. Because if we're going to go by the letter of the law and what the Old Testament text says, then this woman was to be brought outside the city walls and stoned to death. Now, there's no evidence that we've seen that in the first century people actually stoned other people like this. That's not really the religious leaders' concern, though. They're not really concerned with what's going to happen to her. They're concerned with what is Jesus going to say. Because if he says we need to follow the letter of the law, he's going to come across as a rather unmerciful so-and-so. And his reputation as this man of grace and mercy is shot. But on the other hand, if he says, "You know what, guys, just leave her alone, let this one go," he's going to come across as somebody who's not really concerned with what the teachings of the Bible have to say. And his credibility as a teacher is going to be shot. And the religious leaders are thinking, "We got him, guys, we got him. He's danged if he does, he's danged if he doesn't. Jesus is done." But instead of answering, Jesus does something very Jesus-like and weird. And he just bends down and he starts to draw and write something in the dirt. And we don't know what he wrote. I wish we did. There's been a lot of speculation, as you can imagine. Some people think maybe he was writing down certain scripture passages that talk about being a false witness in court, or maybe some passages that talk about aiding and abetting evil people in their ambitions and schemes. We really have no idea. I kind of hope that stuff is true, but who knows? The only thing we know is how the story continues. So let's keep reading that. This is verse 7. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and he said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And at this those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman there still standing there. Jesus straightened up and he asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." And so Jesus is still drawn in the dirt, and they keep asking questions, and so he stands up and he says, "Look, if any of you is without guilt, if any of your hearts are pure and your conscience is clean, then by all means, you be her judge. You pick up the stones." And something about those words, in concert with whatever he was writing in the dirt, convicts these religious leaders, maybe even shames them a little bit. And they realize that what they're doing in that moment is not a just and upright thing. That actually what they're doing is no better than what she has done. The older ones seem to come to this realization first, and so they leave, followed by some of the younger ones. Eventually, all the men are gone, and it's just Jesus and this woman. And so he turns to her and says something very, very significant. It's so significant, in fact, that we have a picture of it that we'd like to show you for everybody to take in and appreciate. It looks like this. He says, "Has no man condemned you? Then neither do I condemn you. Go now and do whatever makes you happy." You're off the hook, girl. We did it. Go follow your dreams. Do you, boo. You're free. No, that's not what Jesus said at all. He never said anything like that. In fact, what he says is, go now and leave your life of sin. And that phrase has a lot of significance packed into it. Your life of sin is kind of an acknowledgement that, lady, what you've been doing is wrong. I'm not going to condemn you for it. I'm not going to have you taken outside and held accountable for it, but that doesn't mean I'm okay with it either. Adultery's wrong. So I want you to leave that. I know he's handsome. I know it feels good. I know it's fun. I know you have feelings for this guy, but it's wrong. I want you to leave that and do something else. I want you to do something better. You see, this is the reality that we live in. There is right and there is wrong. There is obedient to God, there is disobedient to God. There is faithfulness, there is unfaithfulness. These are the dichotomies of the real world that we live in. And they exist for a very good reason. These things that are wrong tend to hurt either ourselves or other people. That's why we're told not to do them. We see this in the legal system, right? There are laws about what we do, what we should not do. You should not go steal things from people because that's going to injure their economic well-being. You should not physically assault somebody. That's going to hurt them. You should not put that substance in your body. It's going to hurt you. There are laws about what we shouldn't do because somebody is going to be injured or harmed in some way by that stuff. We see this dichotomy at work in our homes and in our families. There are rules that you live by in your home, things you do, things you don't do. You take out the trash the night before trash is due. You wash your dishes. Do good things. We don't run with scissors. We don't power bomb our little brother or sister off of the couch like we're in the WWF. Like, these are rules that exist because somebody could easily be injured or hurt. And in his wisdom, God has established a dichotomy between sin and holiness. There is right, there is wrong. And those commands, those stipulations that God gives us about sin, those prohibitions, they exist because somebody, whether somebody else or ourselves, is going to get hurt because of these behaviors. So why do we do them then? Why do we pursue sin in our lives? This is not a hard question. It feels good. It's fun. Sin feels good. If it didn't, we wouldn't do it. We eat half a chocolate cake and cheat on our diet, not because it's a good decision, but because it's fun, right? It tastes good. Dogs drink antifreeze because it tastes good. It's poison, but it sure does taste good. I'm told, I don't know, Sin's fun. That's why we do it. We think that it's going to satisfy. Our heart desires it. It makes us happy, so I'm going to do it. That's what we think, and it's true for a little bit. But here's the part we don't talk about a lot. Happiness without holiness doesn't satisfy for very long. It can't. We wish it did. We really, really want it to, but the reality is, it just doesn't. It's kind of like my relationship with coffee in a lot of ways. I don't have a healthy relationship with coffee. I'm not going to lie about it. No beans about it. But there's your joke this morning. It's bad. The best part of waking up really is Folgers in my cup. And the first thing I do in the morning, I have a cup of coffee. And it's not uncommon that the second thing I do in the morning, I have a cup of coffee, and then I'll come to the office, and I'll make one of those big metal thermos pots of coffee, and I put it in the office for everybody to share and have some because I'm considerate, but the reality is I'm the only one that drinks it, and I know it. And I'll drink it all. But the same thing happens at 3 p.m. every afternoon. And some of you already know what I'm going to say. My brain powers down. It just doesn't function. The heavy lifting is done at 3 p.m. It doesn't matter how much coffee I've drank up to that point. And it doesn't matter how much I drink afterwards. The wheels have stopped turning. Now, I keep drinking coffee thinking maybe that caffeine will wake me up. Maybe it'll give me what I need to get through the day. Maybe it'll just make the next 2 hours a little less draining or a little easier, but it never happens. There is no amount of coffee that will satisfy. There's no amount of coffee that will energize or fulfill. And in many, many ways, the pursuit of happiness without holiness is identical. We reach a point where there is no amount of indulgence that is going to satisfy the way we want it to. There is no amount of indulgence that is going to fulfill the way it used to. It runs dry. It isn't meant to satisfy. And in fact, if we continue to pursue it, it will oftentimes wind up hurting us instead. You take that woman from our passage this morning as a great example of this. Adultery's wrong. You know it. I know it. She knew it. That's why she's so terrified as she comes before Jesus for judgment. She has done something wrong and she knows it. So how did she wind up in this situation if she knew it was wrong? Well, we don't know her story, right? It's not given to us. But we know a lot of stories like hers, so it's not really difficult to imagine how it might have happened. Maybe she has an inattentive husband. Maybe at home, he just takes her for granted. She cooks, she cleans, she raises the kid, and he just kind of sits there. Or maybe he's kind of a jerk. Maybe he's even a little abusive. Nobody could blame her for being unfulfilled in a relationship like that. So maybe one day she goes down to the market and there's this shopkeeper working there one day and he helps her out. He's a really nice guy. And maybe two little kids run by on the market street as they're shopping, and they both laugh because they both have kids, and so they start to talk and they kind of build a friendship. Maybe the next week she comes back and he compliments her perfume. He notices things. It's innocent stuff. And maybe one night she's checking her Facebook feed and she sees that he commented on one of her posts, and those butterflies that she hasn't felt in a long time start to flutter, and she starts to wonder, what if? She starts to look forward to her trips to the marketplace. One day she catches him on his lunch break and they decide they're going to have lunch and talk at the store, and she opens up about her marriage, and he seems to get it because things at home, they're not real great for him either. In fact, on another one of their lunch conversations, he even makes the comment, I wish my wife was more like you. And she blushes because those butterflies are back. One afternoon, she's at the store for the third time that week, and they're talking and their eyes lock and they see that mutual desire, and he says, I'm going to do inventory at the store tonight. You should come by after your family goes to bed. And she's pretty sure what might happen, but she's not certain. And so there's a lot of back and forth, well, will I, won't I, in her mind. And so she stops at her best friend's house on the way home and explains her marriage and how it's kind of loveless, but there's this really nice guy and he seems to be interested. And her friend says, just do whatever makes you happy. And so she goes home that night and she does the dishes and she puts the kids to bed, and all the while her heart's flopping and flipping back and forth because she doesn't know what to do. But what she does know is that she's not happy, that there's something missing. And she convinces herself that he is what's missing. He will make her happy. And so she goes to the store that night and she comes in the front door, and he's in the storeroom and he calls her back, and with the lamp lights flickering and shadows cast against the wall, he wraps his arms around her and he kisses her. And part of her wants to push back because she thinks of her husband and she thinks of her kids, but part of her thinks this feels good. This feels right. It feels good to be desired. It feels good to be loved. It feels good to be happy. And that night, adultery made her happy. And for several weeks, being an adulteress made her happy. Until one afternoon at a lover's rendezvous, there was a bang on the door. And a group of men came in and threw her clothes at her and grabbed her by the arm and paraded her through the streets in front of her neighborhood and in front of the moms of the children that her kids played with. Everybody now knew what used to be a secret. And they took her to the temple courts in front of all these people. And they announced her crimes in front of God and everyone and threw her in front of this guy she didn't know to be judged for her adulteries. And all of a sudden, what used to make her happy no longer satisfied or fulfilled. It terrified her. It filled her with shame, and it filled her with regret, and it filled her with worry because her whole world was about to come crumbling down. What used to make her happy ended up being her downfall. Again, we don't know her story, but I've met people a dozen times over with stories very similar to this one. Happiness without holiness does not satisfy, and oftentimes will lead to pain. But it doesn't have to be adultery. We can change the details. We can change it to something about gambling. I'm going to just gamble a little bit more. My wife doesn't need to know. Eventually, it's a short time before it becomes, I got to win back enough to pay off these credit cards before she finds out. Eventually, it becomes, honey, don't leave me. I have a problem. I'll get help. We could change the details to something about pornography. Just one time. It makes me happy. My wife, my husband, they don't need to know. Eventually, it turns into something. Our intimacy is just not what I wish it was. I wish it was more like those videos that I watch. Eventually, it becomes, I don't think I'm attracted to my spouse anymore. I think our marriage is done. It could be gossip. We can change the details to that. You're playing cards with some friends. Somebody tells a story about somebody you know, and it feels good to be in the know. You know, you got that hot goss. You know something, and so to keep that feeling going, you tell a story about somebody that you know, and word gets around to that person, and now there's a confrontation, and you lose a relationship, and you have a reputation of somebody who just can't be trusted anymore. It happens 1,000 different times in 1,000 different ways. We think sin will make us happy. We think that it will satisfy. Inevitably, though, we find the truth that happiness without holiness, it can't fulfill. And oftentimes it leads to hurt. We have these very real dichotomies that we see at work in life all the time. There's right, there's wrong, faithful, unfaithful, obedient, disobedient. Sometimes we imagine that there's another dichotomy between happiness and holiness. As if I can't have both. I've got to pick. And the only real way to be happy is to follow my heart. The only real way to be happy is to do the things that I crave. That's what's going to make me happy. I have to follow my heart, not Jesus. But I just want to tell you that dichotomy is the biggest load of bull. It's false. The reality is that holiness is the key to a resilient happiness. Now that is an unusual phrase, resilient happiness. You've probably never heard it before because I made it up. Sometimes it's called joy. It's this kind of happiness that doesn't fade, that isn't subject to the twists and the turns of life, that's not going to lead to an inevitable implosion in our well-being. It's a happiness, a joy that continues and persists. We read about it in the Psalms. Psalm 16, verse 11. David, way back in the day, knew this. You make known to me the path of life. Now that sounds like a good thing, right? The path of life, it's not going to be filled with dread. It's not going to be filled with shame. It's not going to be filled with regrets. The path of life. You, God, fill me with joy, a resilient happiness, not by following my heart, joy in your presence. Being in communion and in sync with God is the place where we find that joy. You fill me with eternal pleasures at your right hand. In the presence of God, in proximity of Him, in holiness, in other words, is where we find that joy, the unfettered, unfailing kind of happiness. It's where we find eternal pleasures, not things that are fleeting and things that leave us unfulfilled, but things that endure, things that persist. They're found with God. Now, this is our choice. We can pursue the things that our hearts desire and that makes us happy and then suffer the inevitable implosion, or we can walk in holiness in sync with God and enjoy a kind of joy that doesn't fade. That's a real stumper, right? Which one are we going to choose? I know that on paper, this makes total sense. But I also know firsthand as well as you do that when we're in that moment where temptation is knocking on our door and it promises that very alluring happiness that speaks to the central cravings of our hearts, I know it's really hard to say no. And that's why I oftentimes find myself coming back to this one question I ask myself. I would encourage you, if you don't already, to ask yourself this question. Do I trust God? Do I trust that he really does have my best interests at heart? Do I trust that he really does desire a life that is full for me? That he really does seek to gift to me eternal pleasures at his right hand? Do I trust that? Because if I do, I'm going to listen to what he says. I may not like it, but I trust him nonetheless. And there's reason to trust that God really does care about us like that and really does desire for us to have those eternal pleasures at his right hand, this resilient kind of happiness. And Jesus does say something about that in Matthew chapter 7, verse 11. He says, if you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? If you and I, flawed as we are, let's be honest, we're flawed. We all have shortcomings. Emotionally, spiritually, parentally. It was my son's first birthday party we celebrated yesterday. My 4-year-old wanted to play with his brother's gifts. He knew what Ben was going to get. And so for the last 2 days, he's been asking, can we open Ben's gifts now? Can we open Ben's gifts now? Can we open Ben's gifts now? 1,000 times an hour, he asked the question. My patience was paper thin, and it broke. It broke. I said, Levi, go to your room. We're not going to talk about it anymore. I'm going to take it all back to the store. Not my finest moment, but I'm human. We have failings, right? Though we are evil, that's what Jesus means. Though you are flawed, you have shortcomings, you still know how to give good gifts. And we do, right? We want our kids to be happy. I love giving my 4-year-old gifts because it makes him happy. I remember when Shopko was closing. I don't even remember when it was, but it was closing, going out of business. All the prices were slashed. Our family went up there. He was 3 at the time. And we had a great day, so everybody was in a great mood. And we walk into the store, we get through the doors, and without any prompting, mind you, he says, Daddy, you're the best daddy. So we left Mom and we went to the toy section. And he walked out with a giant Iron Man figure, which was a lot easier to buy because prices were slashed. I'm not made of money. But the point remains, I wanted to give him this gift because I love him, because I know it makes him happy. I really do desire that for him. And I can do that being a very flawed father. Do you trust that God, being unflawed, not suffering any of our shortcomings, do you trust that he wants that same kind of joy for his children? And do you trust that he knows how to fulfill us in ways far superior to how we fulfill our own kids? If we can give good gifts, how much more can he? Just trust him. That's Jesus' point. God's desire isn't for us to have a miserable existence. His desire is, Psalm 16:11, he desires to lead us down paths of joy in his presence. He desires to fill us with eternal pleasures at his right hand. That's what he really wants. But the key word is that he wants to give them to us, not we follow our hearts into sin and find them for ourselves. That's the difference. There is happiness that inevitably betrays us, and then there is joy that inevitably fulfills us. It comes through trusting God and walking in his ways. There's not a dichotomy between happiness and holiness. This idea that we need to follow our hearts and do whatever makes us happy, Jesus never said that. He never said this. I love this last picture. This is your best life now. Live your dreams. Unleash your full potential. Buy material goods and make yourself happy. I love that picture for too many reasons to get into this morning. But he never said any of that. In fact, he taught us a lot of the opposite of that. And we see that in Matthew 7. It doesn't come through pursuing what we want. It doesn't come through following our hearts. It comes through being faithful to God and trusting he wants to fill our lives with good. If you want that kind of happiness that doesn't fade, that kind of joy that is resilient. Don't do the things Jesus never said. Do the things he actually said. And trust your Father who loves you and wants to give you good gifts. Walk in holiness. Let's pray. Father, we live in a world filled with temptation, and we are flawed people who desire things that hurt us. And so I pray for each and every one of us that we would find faith and trust in you and in your word. Jesus modeled for us what that faithfulness looks like. He was betrayed, he was murdered, but he was raised and vindicated and rewarded, not just temporarily, but forever and for eternity. And that reigning king who lives never to suffer death again, he promises you give good gifts, and so we trust what he says. I pray for our hearts that we follow you in obedience and that we would experience the blessings of obedience. That you convict us if we are in the middle of walking the wide path that leads to destruction, that you would save us from that inevitable implosion. And Lord, that we would find this path that fulfills, a path that's not filled with shame or regret, but a path that's filled with joy and that leads to you. We pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.